everyone, I'm Rebecca and I am starting a new historical project! I know that a lot of you have been wanting a historical project, and yes, I am not actually going back to the Rainbow Bustle yet because I am starting something that I think is actually maybe even more exciting. I'm sure you already saw this by the title or the thumbnail or whatever, but I am going to make a robe a la Francaise, like 18th century grand etc. for the first time ever. I know. I have been doing historical costuming for 15 years at this point, and I have never made a robe a la Francaise, which seems kind of crazy because I feel like for a lot of people it is kind of your dream costume and you make it like as soon as you have the ability or funds, etc. to do so. Now, what I have made before that is kind of similar to a robe a la Francaise is a pet inlaire, which apparently actually means fart in the air. And that looks like this. So it's basically a short version of a robe a la Francaise. It is just hip length. However, I made that costume like 11 or 12 years ago at this point, and I was hoping that maybe I still had the pattern for it and could use that as a jumping off point. I don't. I do not have the pattern for that. I don't know what happened to it. Honestly, I don't even know what pattern I might have used. I could dig back through my vlogs, but frankly, looking at the construction of it, it's all wrong anyway, so I don't want to do that. So I was looking at what resources do I actually have available to me, because in doing some research on robe a la Francaises, which if you're not sure what I'm really talking about here, this is what I'm talking about, with the big long pleated back that just flows all the way down, has a little bit of a train on the ground, and just looks oh so elegant. They are also called sack gowns, and by that I mean they are usually spelled S-A-C-Q-U-E, though occasionally you will also see them S-A-C or S-A-C-K, but the primary spelling is S-A-C-Q-U-E, or of course robe a la Francaise is kind of the more commonly, I would say, known term. And as far as I know, both of those terms, certainly the sack gown term, they do actually date to the 18th century and were contemporary terms for this type of outfit. So as I was saying, I went and did some research and I was looking at kind of the most popular patterns for sack gowns or robe a la Francaise. And frankly, the one that came up the most was the JP Ryan pattern. I'll link it down in the description. However, I'm not using that pattern because I don't own that pattern and it's not available as an e-pattern. It is only available as a physical pattern. And of course, I decided like 3 or 4 days ago that I wanted to start this project now. So therefore I could not use that pattern. So I'm using a different physical pattern, plus I'm using 3 different books. So let me tell you what those are. So first off, the main pattern that I'm using is Simplicity 8578. That is the American Duchess pattern with Abby on the cover. And I believe that she and Lauren worked together on this pattern, but I won't swear to it. Now, I do like this pattern. I've looked it over. I've actually read all the instructions, which is like, what? Me reading pattern instructions? I don't do that. But because this is really something that's pretty new to me, I wanted to thoroughly read it. I also wanted to thoroughly read it because I am comparing this pattern to those 3 texts, one of which is the accompanying book that American Duchess put out, 18th Century Dressmaking. And this has basically the same garment in it, but it's done in historical methods. So we're talking like hand sewing, more accurate patterning, more accurate assembly especially. And frankly, I'm going to be doing a mixture of the two because I certainly don't mind machine sewing some long seams. Heck, I don't mind machine sewing as many seams as I can get away with. But there are other elements that just make more sense when you do them in the 18th century method. And there are also some areas on 18th century garments where you would actually see the hand sewn seams because of things like prick stitching or like overlapping a seam as opposed to putting them right sides together and turning them out. So in some of those areas, I think I may incorporate some hand sewing. Also, there's probably going to be some stuff needed on like trimming and stuff. There's probably going to be a fair amount of hand sewing on this outfit, but I would like to cheat as much as possible and use machine sewing as much as possible as well. The other two references that I am using for this project are both Janet Arnold books. So we have Patterns of Fashion 6 and Patterns of Fashion 1. These are the new editions, and by new editions I mean actually this is a new book. This didn't exist previously to my knowledge, and then this is the new edition of 1. What I do really like about the new edition of 1 are color pictures. And actually 6 has color as well. But just for example, this is the Robe a la Francaise that they have in this book that has always been shown in the patterns, even in the old edition. But now we get all of the nice color photos of it as well, and really nice up-close detail shots too. So this is a really, really cool resource. You can also see in 6 where they have actually like colorized the entire pattern, which is pretty cool and a good way to see like how the scale of the pattern is playing out, etc. And this one is this dress right here. So this is a 1765 to 75 sack. They spell it S-A-C-K, Robe a la Francaise, made out of patterned silk tissue. Now, something that I was originally intending for this project when I kind of first planned it and put it into my plans last year when I purchased the fabric in last year's visit to the LA Fabric District was I had planned to do a contrast petticoat to the gown itself. For one thing, it's what you see in patterns like this. You're seeing the contrast, of course, and I feel like it's what you see a lot of times in movies and stuff as well. But frankly, in doing my research now, I was coming up with almost no gowns that had a contrast petticoat to the gown itself. And when I say petticoat in this case, if you're not familiar with 18th century, they used the term petticoat both for something that you would not see worn under the dresses, as well as something that you would see, the part that was open in the front and you'd see it underneath the gown being the thing that started at your shoulders, went all the way to the floor, the hem, etc. And then a separate petticoat being worn that was also decorated but just was worn from the waist down. And so when I purchased my fabric for this, I bought two different fabrics. I bought this, which is a really wide stripe, and I believe I got this one at Home Fabrics. And I bought this, which is a shot silk taffeta, and I believe I bought this one from Memo Fabrics, if I'm remembering correctly. And actually, I had bought a couple of different other gown fabrics as well that can all be interchanged with this. I literally have 3 striped fabrics that all match this fabric right here. But again, in doing my research, that was not very common. It was something that they did for a very, very short period of time, and by like the 1775-ish era, which is really when I'm kind of basing this project, they didn't really do that anymore. They had matching petticoats to their gowns. However, I have approximately 10 yards of this fabric. Normally that would be plenty of fabric, but Robe a la Francaises, Robe a la Francaise, I don't know how to pluralize them. They eat fabric like crazy because you have all of that fabric being pleated into the neck, and again it's running all the way down and dragging just a little bit on the floor. Not to mention you've got the huge hips, or at least medium-sized hips, that are also eating a ton of fabric. So I have come up with a potential few ways that we can do this, and I'm hoping that it all works out. For one thing, I really lucked out because if you saw my video from a couple of weeks ago of my visit to the Fabric District this year, I got this polyester taffeta in light blue, which is basically, okay, it looks different on camera, but frankly, they are so close. Now it's looking a little better. They're such a close color match for the stripe versus this poly. So one of the things that I was thinking about is potentially doing the back of the petticoat in this, because we're not going to see it. Occasionally you would see Robe a la Francaise that were pulled up and back to reveal even the back of the petticoat. That was not as common. So I could make the back of the petticoat out of this. I can also possibly do maybe some of the trimming out of this. However, my other thought then is to do the trimming out of the pink. And this is going to also coordinate with the other thing that I have for this project, which is something that I thrifted and I showed you in a thrift haul not too long ago, and that is this beautiful Indian garment. Now, normally I would not go and like buy an Indian garment cultural garment to just cut up and like destroy. But this one is actually already destroyed. It's stained all over. And so I am only using the little embellishments of this garment, and I'm repurposing them to have new life in my Robe a la Francaise. And as you can see, this matches incredibly well with this silk as well as the pink stripe that is running through the blue. So here's the thing. Normally, with a project like this, I would start with the petticoat first. And frankly, that's probably what you are kind of trained to do, because then you know exactly how long you need for the gown to fit over the petticoat. That said, I do already have like a base under petticoat. I know it's covered in pattern tissue right now and you can't really probably see it very much, but I do have that already on the form, and a petticoat is not going to change the length very much, and I can always wait to do my actual hem until I have the petticoat made. But if I make the gown first, then I can know how much of the blue striped fabric I will have left in order to put it into the petticoat. And frankly, if I use up like all 10 yards in the gown, I'm gonna have a pink petticoat. I'm gonna have a contrast petticoat. And that is just what it is, because we are working with what we have. This is basically stash. Yes, I bought it a year ago for this project, but at this point it has become stash. Now, there are some changes that I know I already need to make to this pattern because, for one thing, it's not size inclusive. I don't blame American Duchess for that. I blame Simplicity for that, but it goes up to a pattern size 22. According to this pattern's measurements, I think I am more like a pattern size 26, so I am sizing this up 2 sizes. I have done a video all about how I size up commercial patterns, so I will link that right down below in the description if you want to go check that out. But I've already kind of notated on my pattern pieces where that's going up. And basically in cases like this, I am just taking 2 pattern sizes and adding. This one makes it really big and this pattern piece might be totally wrong, but that's why we're doing a mock-up. The other thing that I need to change about this is, frankly, I don't like the way that it fits on Abby. I feel like the neckline is just really, really wide and almost like it's bowing out. And I feel like when I look at Robe a la Francaise in general, they don't do that. They come much more straight down as opposed to bowing out down. So I don't know if there was a fit issue or if that's how Abby prefers her gowns, but that is what I'm going to change to, is I'm going to make it so that mine goes straight down. I'm also probably going to be incorporating some of the little fixes that they talk about in a blog post that kind of accompanies the Simplicity version of this pattern. And it's basically like how to kind of tweak this pattern to make it a little bit more historical, but maybe not as historical as what is in their book when we're using like full hand sewing and everything. There is, however, one item within that blog post that I am most likely not going to do because it involves kind of changing the shape of the front of the skirt so that you get a more economical use of your fabric, and you kind of add in an inverse wedge into that, like you cut it off and you flip it over. And I feel like with my stripe that's just gonna make things weird, so I am not doing that one. But we are not anywhere near getting to cutting out the gown yet, because I want to cut out the lining first, or really the mock-up of the lining first, try that on over my stays and everything, and see what all we need to fix. So let's go ahead and do a mock-up. Oh, by the way, one thing that I do normally do with Simplicity patterns or any commercial pattern is I lengthen the bodice, and I usually do that before I even make the mock-up. I'm not doing it in this case because I really don't know how this is going to fit. I have heard that the gown itself is incredibly short, whereas the petticoat is long on kind of your average sewer. So I am just going to cut the mock-up of the bodice as is after having sized it up to the size 26 equivalent, and we will see what that gets to. There's also a lot of flexibility in this sort of pattern because it's actually open in the very center back and it ties across. Sometimes you see ones that lace up the center back as well, or instead. And so that gives you some flexibility in the actual fit, and not a ton, because I still want the fronts to fit me correctly, but then the fronts are also attached to a stomacher. So yeah, I guess I'm probably going to mock up the stomacher piece as well as the front and back lining piece and just see how those go together. I have concerns. This is the stomacher. I have folded in all of the seam allowances, and I just stood in front of the mirror to hold it up to my stays. and it is very wee. It's so short. I don't think it's supposed to be this short. Like, my stays go to here. Also, this would be super low if it's only going down to there. Like, I know that I like a slightly higher neckline, and my shimmies, I need to replace it. We've talked about this before. If you've seen other past 18th century or Regency videos on my channel, my shimmies is in desperate need of replacement. Literally, I made it in 2010, and so the neckline is super off on this, but I still, this is not where necklines can be. This is dangerous, and so this needs to be at least a little bit higher. And that would make it even shorter. Like, that's my natural waist, I think. Wait, is it even? Yeah, it's not even coming to my natural waist. So I'm gonna put this bodice on, but I don't have high hopes. Oh dear. Oh dear. Oh dear. This might be the most short-waisted pattern I've ever tried on. I just put my hand here. My 4 fingers fit between the bottom of this bodice and my natural waist. So, not adding in length to this was a problem. It's also a little bit too large around the waist. I'm not sure exactly where that's coming from. As you can tell, I did not cut the slit in the back that is meant to be laced closed. I cut it on the fold because I didn't want to have to like add laces, etc. So I don't know if that is where the extra room is coming from, but also it shouldn't lace completely together because that defeats the purpose of laces. So right now, I'm pretty sure it would be laced completely together because I'm pretty sure all of the excess is coming from the back. I'm gonna have to study this quite a bit in the mirror. As I mentioned with the stomacher, I have already folded up the seam allowance down here, so like where this ends is where this ends. It's not like I would have to remove additional, but it doesn't work. The other thing that I did not do, because I realized something between the book and the pattern, is that I did not change the neckline here from the Simplicity pattern, because I realized like Abby's wearing the same dress in the Simplicity pattern and in the American Duchess book. In the American Duchess book, the bodice fronts are built differently. They have a separate bodice and a separate strap piece. So therefore, this pattern is not actually what we're seeing in the picture, most likely. I can't speak for certain, obviously. She may have made 2, but I kind of doubt it because they're identical. So this actually looks pretty okay, I think. I obviously haven't pinned in the stomacher, and it's obviously crazy short. But this part, specifically, I think looks okay. So yeah, I'm gonna go study the mirror and see what all needs to be done besides greatly increasing the length and probably taking width out of the waist. But this ain't it. Okay, so obviously the biggest issue with this is just that it is laughably short. I mean, like this should be here-ish, pretty much. So I think that's like, I don't know, 5 inches or something. I haven't measured it yet, but it's a stupid amount. Like, again, I have never had to lengthen a bodice that much, so it's a little bit crazy to me. Anyway, and also I should say points do vary depending on what era you are going for. So you are going to find some points of bodices for 18th century, even in Robe Francaise, that are very, very low. I am not going for that. I am also not going for like, there's really none that are exactly natural waist that I can tell. Maybe there's a few in like the 1750s or something, but most, the point at least, dips below the natural waist. And I mean, frankly, like my natural waist in the 18th century, because of the shape of stays, your waist actually does kind of dip down in front anyway. And so we're looking at like here. So it's just really, really, really far off. And frankly, even when we look at the pattern envelope, granted, we can't really tell where Abby's waist is, but this is below her natural waist, or at least it seems like it. I know that she is significantly shorter than me, so maybe that's the issue here, is that like this is literally just the length that she requires for a bodice. But obviously I am tall, but I am not usually 5 inches of torso length taller than most people. Now, not all of that is coming from this portion of the bodice, because I think you can see these really weird wrinkles here. Some of that is because it's too large, but some of it is because the arm's eye is also way too high. So the arm's eye for me should be like probably about right here. So part of that is that the shoulder drop needs to be more. However, where this is, because I like a higher bodice, I went and I checked where like the pattern dots are on here. So this is where it's supposed to meet up with the side front here. And actually I have it exactly. So that is where it is supposed to meet. However, I like it higher. So therefore, even though this is technically too short for me, it's working for me. So what that means is I just need to cut out the arm's eye a little bit more and then extend the length of the waist. I have also pinned out some sections here. I did a little bit at the center back, but honestly the side, like this portion under here, this needs to come out as well, and probably the back portion where it's meeting there, which is why I pinned it directly on the seam. So I have to go back through and just like I have to recut all this because I have to make a longer bodice. So I'm making another mock-up. We're starting like, you know, completely just extending this. I'm going to measure how long every little bit of the extension needs, because obviously the back is not 5 inches, like 1.5 maybe, just from feel. So the back doesn't need to be extended nearly as long as the front. And maybe it's not 5 inches. Maybe it is 3.5. 4. Oh wait, that was the seam allowance was up. 4. We'll measure it. We'll see. It needs to be a lot. Okay, the way that I worked this out is that I pinned on this black twill tape all the way around, and actually it turns out that the back is not too short. I think that's because it's too big, so we will have to see if once I make those changes if it becomes too short. But I think I actually maybe don't have to recut the back for right now. I think I just have to take pieces out of it for right now. But I've gone over, and I don't think you're gonna be able to see this because I marked it in pink, but I made little like hash marks in pink, and then I correspondingly put like this needs to be extended like 2 3/8, 1 1/4, 3.25 right here at the very front, 4.5 at the very center. And I went and I marked those little hash marks so that I could know what those correspond to. That way I can draw in a new curve around. So obviously I'm gonna have to recut this. I have also drawn in a new line for the arm's eye. I'm a little bit worried about that because it doesn't seem that big here, and then it is way too high here. So I'm gonna have to figure out how to like meld those together, because it's so wrinkly and stuck under here that I can't even draw the line in well. So yeah, I'm gonna take this apart, cut new side fronts and a new stomacher, and make changes to the back, and we'll see what happens. Good news! It works! So yeah, doing all of those little changes was like exactly what I needed apparently, because it now seems pretty perfect. This is the only thing I'm still not sure about, is that I am still getting some wrinkles under the arm. I can't tell if that is because the arm's eye is still a little too high. It doesn't feel high, but I think that that might be something that I have to determine more when I'm setting the sleeves. I also feel like the neckline is really small. So I do wonder about that. And frankly, there is a lot of overlap between this and the stomacher. Like, I think it was, oh yeah, I can feel the edges of the stomacher. They're right here. So I don't know if this is supposed to actually be wider or not. I think yes. And it may be that it changes depending on the era, but I do think it's meant to be a little wider. So I might go ahead and kind of like fold that back even a little bit more, but this is so much better than it was before. Look how nice it is in the back too. I think it's just really, really great. It feels comfortable. So I do also wonder, no, I think this is the right width of the shoulder. They did have a little bit of wider shoulders in that era, I think. I'm gonna have to do a little bit of research on that and see if the shoulder actually needs to come in a little. I just have really narrow shoulders. So yeah, overall, I mean, I'm really happy with this. I'm gonna do a little bit of research on like necklines, shoulders, etc. to determine if this is the final. And then the other problem is that I have to somehow translate this to the like actual gown. I don't think that this will actually change the back piece. The front pieces are the same. Like you use the lining pieces with this pattern, at least. You use the lining pieces as the outer pieces as well. So that's good because that's really where I made all of the changes. The only changes to the back were narrowing it both at the side back seam and also here at the center. Because actually what I did at the center was I basically made a completely triangular dart so that the back can now be recut flat without any seam in the back because I made it completely straight. So it will lay flat. Like I didn't want to do a curved dart where I'd have to actually have a dart. I do still, I think, plan to have it tie in the back, though it almost feels like I don't need it to. I don't know if that's something that like most Robe à la Francaise had was a tied opening. That's what I see in modern day patterns. Like the JP Ryan pattern has lacing up the back. I'm pretty sure that I saw that online. Obviously this one does. And yet I don't feel like we actually get that in Janet Arnold. Oh no, never mind. This one definitely has lacing up the back as well. Okay, right there you can see the lacing panel. Let me check the other one. Yeah, the other one, the red striped one, that does not appear to. There is no close-up of it. You can see a close-up of the buttonholes in the stomacher front, but no close-up of lacing in the back. Unfortunately, there's no interior shot at all, but in the pattern area too, it doesn't mention there being any ties. And just so that you can see what that pattern looks like, that is this. So you can see there's not like little eyelets notated or anything like that on the pattern. So I think that it kind of depended on the mantua maker to see if you had an open back or not. I kind of feel like it's not necessary because I got this to fit right. I guess it gives you adjustability down the road so that if you get larger or smaller, you can make it larger or smaller because the pleats obviously have a lot of growing room or shrinking room where that doesn't matter. So I suppose that that is useful, but it doesn't necessarily seem like it is necessary and it's a little bit more work. So I think I might not because I got the fit right. So yeah, I'm gonna just take a look at the fold over here, see how much maybe of the stomacher I can potentially cut off if I don't open this up significantly, but I'm pretty darn happy. Okay, yeah, I folded the neckline out more to make it wider. I think I actually widened it by probably about 1.25 inches total because I think it's about 5/8 inch on each side. You can see the blue line was where it was before, and I think this is so much better. So I'm gonna draw on a new line in a different color, I guess, make sure that it's like even on both sides. But at that point, I think we are good. I haven't checked the shoulders yet, but this neckline just feels way better, but still being comfortable. Like, I don't know if making it much wider would make me feel comfortable, particularly because you can see that my chemise is already showing over here. I might actually, I think there's an American Duchess pattern that goes along with this that has a new chemise in it or has a chemise in it. I might try that after I finish this project to see if I can get myself a better chemise. And I guess I won't have to worry about the waist length of that at least. But yeah, this is looking so good. So I'm gonna do a little research on the shoulders, but I think we're there. So yeah, the shoulders are obviously not patterned correctly because I do think that it was more common to have a separate strap because a lot of 18th century sleeves were basically set by putting them under that strap. At least that's how it is with robe à l'anglaise. I would assume that it's probably pretty the same for robe à la Francaise. This, by the way, is a style of robe à la Francaise that does not have robings. I was under the impression before starting into this project that they all had robings, and then looking through it looks like at some point robings did not become a thing anymore. So like by the 1770s, most Robe à la Francaise, it seems, did not have robings, or if they did, they were completely buried under trim. So I'm just not worried about it because this pattern doesn't have it, and I'm not going to add it in because that to me is a very complicated part. However, it does seem like generally speaking, the shoulders are a little bit wider set. Some are narrow. Like this is a lovely close-up where you can see that my shoulders look absolutely nothing like some 18th century shoulders, but they also seem all fairly different. So I'm just going to stick with it as it is. If it bothers me when I put the sleeves on, I can always, you know, cut it in a little bit more. But yeah, I think we are ready to translate this to silk. So in order to cut out the appropriate shaped silk piece here for the back, I am comparing what the original lining pattern looked like, which is this one here, versus the actual like gown pattern, and actually they have the same shape. It's just that the lining extends down about 1.25 inches, I think that is, past the kind of like where the waist goes out here for the pleats. So I then need to compare what I came up with versus those patterns and change this shape, because remember I did drop the arm side down a little bit. I sized this up initially anyway, and then also I took the back in just a little bit. So like my piece right here does not really align with this pattern. You can see it goes a little bit differently here. It's actually pretty close, to be honest, but it is a little bit different. So I just have to change. Of course, I had already notated in Sharpie what I need to do to like size this up, which is not true because I wound up taking some of that away. So I need to change those markings, basically line up where I can, which really like this I had extended up. So frankly, this should probably actually go up to about there, and then I should kind of draw in my new lines there, like cutting off a little bit over here, extending out this way over here, and then just sizing up that extension there. In fact, actually what I've decided to do here, because they are weird amounts that would be drawn up in various places, at some point I will probably go ahead and kind of recut a paper version of this. But what I've actually done here is I matched up things that I didn't change, like the length of the back. I didn't actually wind up changing the length of the back, and the like width right up here, I didn't wind up changing that from the paper pattern. So I've lined things like that up, and I have pinned this in place, matching up this paper pattern to this paper pattern and having the actual like what I'm using sandwiched in between, and I'm pinning them together, and I'm just going to use that to trace my outline for the silk. Also, it doesn't matter that I like took in width, because that is all just free flowing pleats anyway. So yeah, that part doesn't matter. It's really just the shape here, and the height is what matters. Okay, so I've been trying to figure out just how much I need to lengthen this pattern by. When I first did my math, it was 14.5 inches was what I came up with. I'm not really sure how I got that number. Then I looked at it again and I was like, no, I think it's 16.5 inches. So then I held up that length, which would be 69 inches from neck to hem. I held that up like in the actual silk, and it barely touched the floor. And I mean, that's like unhemmed. So I feel like usually when you see pictures of Robe à la Francaise, they have a little bit of sweep to the floor. So that's what I'm going for. Hopefully I'm not making it too long, but I'm actually going to increase this pattern by 19.5 inches. Now, I say 19.5 inches. I did not tape the like extensions. So each of these pieces, it's like 3A, 4A. So I don't actually know how long those pieces are. I think looking at them, they were about like this long, which is obviously not 19.5 inches. But yeah, I'm making mine 72 inches long from neck to hem. I am 5'10", and I will wind up wearing like a 1.5 inch heel or so with this. It seems very long, but at the same time, I feel like thinking back to something like Elsa, I feel like I'm remembering that being like 90 something inches. So it's not nearly as long as like that cape. But yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and rip the fabric and hopefully not send Cookie into a tailspin, because if you've seen some of my last videos, you will know that he doesn't like that. So I have measured this out on one side. I already ripped the end of this fabric, which I was surprised was not already ripped, because usually that is how they do it from the LA Fabric District. But here we go, moment of truth. So here's my back panel. Oh yeah, speaking of which, so not all of this is actually the back panel, because the back panel is supposed to be cut in 2 pieces with a seam in the middle. And to me, that seems weird because it's literally a rectangle. I know that historically speaking, fabric was narrower. I think it was 20 or 21 inches, something like that. So it seems like maybe that was what like Abby was working with, at least for the back panel of this pattern. But then the side back panel has like size adjustment. The back panel has no size adjustment, so it is the same for every single size, which seems really weird to me because I feel like it should increase. Like the total increase with this, it is 1/2 inch every size difference for the entire, like from the center back all the way to the side. It's 1/2 inch for each size, which seems very, very small. So I'm making this more. I'm kind of working with the stripe pattern on my fabric and just kind of estimating based on my size. But basically for the center back, I'm going to make this a little bit wider than what it says in the pattern. I am going to center it on a pink stripe, and then I'm going and using like all but 1 pink stripe. So I will wind up cutting off this little excess right here because that just seems like it would make it too wide. However, for the side back pieces, which are obviously like you have to cut them in 2, but I'm going to cut them on the fold, and I'm going to use the entire width of the fabric, which basically takes like the sizing up math that I did for commercial sizing up and then adds like a 1/2 inch. So it's honestly pretty close just because of the width of my fabric. And yeah, I'm gonna cut my panels. I don't know necessarily what that means for like where the stripes will interact from the center back to side back. Hopefully it will be relatively even, or hopefully I will at least be able to hide that within the pleats. But we're gonna go ahead and cut those pieces. I mean, frankly, we already cut one. This is the back piece. We're just gonna cut the excess off and then cut the side back piece. So one of the things that both the American Duchess book and also their like blog post explaining the pattern, both of them talk about the fact that this winds up getting folded in a little bit more. This, by the way, is the center front or center-ish front of the skirt. So it's this edge right here that you're seeing there, and then it gets folded in. So you can see like this is a big diagonal line about fold back right there. Now I, of course, am dealing with these stripes. So I don't want to take a stripe going like this and then fold it back and cut it off, because when I'm looking at the 18th century examples in Janet Arnold, that's not what happens. They have the stripe running straight down, which would mean the stripe is positioned this way. So since we're already kind of playing with grain on this pattern piece, like it is not the side seam that is on the grain, it was saying that the front was on the grain, but then if we are turning back some, then the new turned back front has to be on the grain. So that's how I'm cutting it. I don't know if you can really see the fold here, but I folded it over just a little bit, not too much. What is that, like 2.5, 3 inches, something like that by the time we're getting down to the bottom. And we are folding that back and making that the grain. And I've decided, I guess I'm not going to extend it all the way across the fabric, especially now that I've lost some of the width down here. That would just be kind of like adding it in maybe unnecessarily. So I am going to extend the pattern out the 1.5 inches that I had factored in before. But beyond that, I don't think I'm going to extend that even further. I'm a little bit concerned about how this line just like suddenly has a corner and turns in to the center front, which is what you're looking at here, where nothing that I'm seeing, including their book, shows that. And that's true of the Patterns of Fashions books as well. They're like straight across. And so I think I'm going to drop this down longer. Unfortunately, I've already drawn my line and I doubt that it will erase fully because this is silk and silk never tends to erase fully. But I think I'm going to drop this down a little bit more because I also checked this length with, or rather I checked this length plus 8.5 inches with like the actual it on the dress form. And it looked like I might need a little bit more than that just in case of hem if I want this to be almost touching the floor. So yeah, I think I'm going to bring this down 1 inch and just kind of smooth this out a little bit so that there's not a random corner right there where it suddenly starts to turn up. So just as a little tip, since I was talking about the friction pens, this is what the blue one looks like before you erase it. This is what the blue one looks like on silk after you erase it. In other words, almost the same. I did try to use a little bit of water to kind of make it go away. However, as you can see, what that also creates is a bit of a water spot, and you still get the ghost of the friction pen. So just be careful when you're using friction pen on silk. This is right by the edge and by the hem, so frankly, it's probably going to go away anyway. Just something to be careful about, because friction pen will not erase from all fabrics, and silk tends to be one of the worst offenders. So excellent news. The only pieces left to cut out of the gown itself are the bodice fronts, stomacher, and the sleeves, which don't take up that much fabric, frankly. And I actually still have over 4 3/4 yards left of this silk, which is really, really exciting. I for sure can get the petticoat front in there. Presumably the petticoat trimming is not going to be a problem at all, because I'm going to be doing at least probably a ruffle out of the stripes is what I'm thinking, and then other smaller, like a ruffle as in a hanging ruffle, and then other smaller squirrely or snaky type ruched trim probably out of the pink. And that's my plan for the gown as well, to do the trim actually mostly out of the pink. But this is enough for that petticoat front, for the longer petticoat ruffle, maybe even 2, and maybe even the petticoat back. I'm going to continue cutting out the bodice related pieces, and then we can start sewing things together. I have my bodice fronts cut out, and I'm trying to figure out how I want to orient the stomacher. So I was looking at my stomacher piece here, kind of trying to figure out, you know, how many of these I could get away with. I unpicked the edges of this and cut it off from the bottom of the dress. I think I'm probably only going to be able to do like 3 of these on the stomacher, which is not going to be the full length of the stomacher because I extended it longer. So that's a little bit unfortunate. I'm going to have like little gaps in between the motifs, but I think I will still get 3 across. However, I'm trying to figure out what to make the stomacher out of, because I could make it out of the gown fabric, but then there's the question of, if I make it out of the gown fabric, would I center it like between the stripes, or would I center it on a stripe, or would I flip that over and have it be like stripe motif, stripe motif? I feel like that is weird. I'm not loving that. Or I could do it out of the pink, which is kind of what I'm leaning towards, because this looks really nice, and I feel like just kind of hand whip stitching the edges of that onto the pink, it's just gonna blend more. I'm just kind of liking this icy pink look a little bit better, but honestly, I might have to leave the stomacher until we start to get more into like trimming, because then I'll be able to see how I'm playing around with this otherwise for the trim as well. So I may even have to like kind of start the petticoat before I can really decide on stomacher color, but I'm definitely leaning towards this pink because it just goes so nicely with this, and I'm just dying over the sparkle. It's seriously so pretty. And I am going to be using, as I said, the other appliques from this elsewhere on the gown as well, within all of the trimming. So I'll probably just kind of cut each one, fold it in, and then whip stitch that in place wherever I want. I've got a whole bunch of them, which is really nice, and that will kind of tie in with this. I'll be able to use them both on the petticoat and on the gown itself within the trimming. So since I can't really decide on the stomacher yet, I guess that means I should just like put together the other pieces. So I was looking through all of the hand stitches in this book to see like what might be a good one to use for those longer seams where I have a raw edge, because I don't really want to do serging on here, because if this were to flap open in the wind, you'd see it because there's no lining. So I was looking specifically at this one, the Mantua Maker seam, because I know that I've heard of that one before, and it's like to join fabrics together and encases everything really nicely without like having to hand whip stitch everything down. And so I was like, okay, let's just see if I can fake that on the machine. And so that's what I've done here actually. So the way that this worked was I took my 2 pieces right here, right sides together. One of them is meant to be a little bit farther out than the other. So like I didn't try and match this at all, but you can see that it's a little bit offset because these were actually both selvage edges to start. And so I offset one, and then the bottom one, which is the longer one, that folds around the top edge, and then you fold it again. So that's what this little fold is right here. And then I top stitched right on the edge of that other fold. So this is already an encased seam. And then when you open that up, you basically get a lovely felled seam, nice on the outside. In fact, it doesn't even look that weird that it's, you know, a different width, and really nice on the inside. So that's what I'm going to do for my non-selvage edge seams. So the challenge here is taking the Mantua Maker's seam, or my faked Mantua Maker's seam, but it's probably all one and the same, and then turning it into the pocket slit area. At first I actually forgot and I sewed this shut, but I just unpicked it. The thing is that, like, so, okay, this is folded this way, so that you can see this is the raw edge and it is folded like that, and this is how this seam goes. I could have pressed it either way, but regardless, I pressed it this way, and this is kind of what's happened here. So, like, I'm kind of thinking I could just stitch right along this edge again, maybe do another row of stitching here so that it doesn't flap outwards. I don't really think it will if I'm top stitching this edge sandwiched shut like that. And then this one, I could either turn this smaller and just have a really, really narrow, or I could probably turn this again without too much trouble, or maybe like do half and half and kind of make it a little bit smaller, but not all the way. But yeah, I do have a weird kind of place where that meets, but obviously we do need this open for pocket slit access. Yeah, I'm sure I should have done it by hand, but frankly, this thread blends in really well. This one in particular is so along the edge, I feel like it almost disappears. This one's a little bit less so, but that is my pocket slit sewn by machine. Hopefully I can press out a little bit of this tension that's on that side. I'm not sure why that side came off a little bit more wrinkly, but not too bad. And it's going to be hidden by pleats anyway. So for this long center back to side back seam on here, I'm kind of doing like a half mantua seam. Basically, this is a selvage edge, this one is not. So instead of folding it twice like I was before, I've only folded it once. I'm hoping that that's not a stupid idea and that it won't just like pull out of the raw edge over here. I feel like it's in enough of the fabric that it won't be a problem, hopefully. But yeah, that's what I'm doing for this seam. So this is really obnoxious. My iron keeps spitting all over this fabric, and I feel like maybe you can't see it from here, but when we get really close, you can see the staining from my iron spitting all over this fabric. This is at least the third time that's happened, and it's really annoying. Okay, so as you can see, I kind of have some pleating going on in here now. I have assembled all of the gown pieces, like the center back, the side backs, and the side front pieces, not the like fitted structural pieces. Well, actually, I did assemble those in the linen. I haven't added any silk to this yet because that is now the next step. So I have assembled the rest of these. By the way, I don't remember if I mentioned it or not, but the other side back to center back seam where both of them were selvages, I just put those together using a regular machine stitch and press that open. So I did not use any sort of fancy stitch because that sort of thing would have been done by like a running stitch if you were doing it by hand, and I figured this is the equivalent. So yeah, that is all kind of there, and I've kind of mocked up the pleats, but I have to figure out if they actually fit with the shape of the lining. So with the lining, I have assembled the fronts and backs together, and I've also turned in the seam allowances on like the neck edge, front edge, and the hem. To my knowledge, we don't do anything with the arm size yet. I haven't seen that anywhere in the instructions. And basically, I started doing this while looking at the simplicity instructions, and then looked at the book instructions where you would not actually start doing this first. You would assemble these two pieces first, but not the side front, which is actually what simplicity has you do first. They do this seam, the side front seam first. So I just did all of it. Of course, what that means is I'm kind of dragging around extra fabric that I don't necessarily need to or maybe want to be doing yet. But the next step, from as best as I can tell, is to actually start putting this gown part onto this lining. Now, when I say that I like pressed in the edges, that is going to be the part, like this is going to have silk here, and the nicely finished part is going to be against my body and my stays. So that way all of the seams, the like raw edges, go in and we don't see those. So I have to figure out how exactly this works. In the book, the American Duchess book, there is some sort of very fancy looking herringbone stitch, and it seems very complicated of how you actually get the pleats to attach to the back, and I'm really not quite sure how all of that works. So I'm going to read this through one more time, see if I can figure that out. If I can't, I am probably just going to make this bit a little bit higher than like my finished clean edge here, and then fold that in so that I don't see the edges and the raw edges will be kind of sandwiched in between. But yeah, I have to figure out how to fit this to this and how to get it to stay in place using maybe some mixture of hand and machine sewing. The next thing that the book would have me do is actually to mount the front pieces, but I still just have this like little thing in the back of my head that I don't know if that center front opening that I created was wide enough. And so I don't want to hand sew the center fronts together, because that's what would happen. Basically, I would take my front pieces here, I would fold in the edge of this like I've done with this, and then I would like do a little slip stitch together so that the seam allowances are inside and they're kind of mounted together. But again, I don't really want to do that yet, so I don't see any issue with starting with the back, especially because the front, like where the front meets the back, that actually gets folded over and sewn on top of the back. So like you can't sew that part of this yet anyway. So I'm just gonna leave that to the side and do this part and hope that it works. Yeah, no, I have just read this through again and I'm still not understanding, because it is saying to like pleat up the robe part and place it with wrong sides together over the lining and then like stitch that all down in place through the pleats and everything, but then flip that open and herringbone stitch something along the neckline. I don't understand, and the pictures in here are not helping. It's like I want to physically move them around so that I can see different things or zoom in on things, and yeah, not helping. So I'm gonna make it up and I'm gonna do this with wrong sides together and like laying one on top of the other, and I'm just gonna fold over the top and like make that closed all nicely in with the closed up top of the lining, and hopefully it'll work. So somehow, just from eyeballing the pleats and like where I wanted the stripes to be, I got the width exactly right. I don't know how I did that. So I am just going to base that in place. That way I can get rid of all the pins and attach it to the lining, I guess. So this is where we are at the pinning on stage. I think that the pleats wind up getting stitched down with like a prick stitch about 4 inches. I have to double check my pattern, but I pinned it down 4 inches, and that's all I pressed too. I wasn't really sure how far these pleats actually get pressed, so I might need to read a little bit farther into that, but I just pressed it to here. And then my edges are folded in, ready to be whip stitched there. The prick stitch will then help keep all of that in place too, like once these are all kind of sandwiched and flattened for the first 4 inches up there. And then I brought the shoulder seams over and matched them up with the shoulder seams of the lining. This one wound up being like the hairiest hair bit short on the edge, but then it matches up down here. So I think I must have just had a little cutting error or something, but it should be fine. So now I have a lot of hand sewing in my future, which may mean that that's really all I wind up getting done the rest of this video, because it's Sunday at 4:30 and I don't have that much more time to sew because I have to edit this video. So we'll see how much more I get done today. I will show you. I'm hoping to get at least a little bit of the hand sewing done, so fingers crossed. So as I kind of expected, the editing of this video, because I've already edited the rest of this, took too long, and I have not been able to do any more sewing on the gown, which, by the way, I realized I never mentioned why I'm making this gown. I am actually going to the 18th Century Salon, the global salon that is being hosted by Costumers of Color in downtown Seattle the first Saturday of October. So that is my deadline for this project. I'm excited to go. I found out that but I won't be able to go to the next 2 upcoming Regency balls that are coming up here. So I decided to kind of blow the budget and go to this one instead. I wasn't able to go last year because I had a show, but I don't start rehearsals for my next show for a little while. So yeah, that's what I'm making this for. Very excited, and honestly I'm pretty happy with how much work that we got done this week. Next week it's going to be a little bit slower going, A, because I have more going on, and B, because all of the next steps are hand sewing and I'm a slow hand sewer. So hopefully I will have at least some of a video to show you next week, but it'll probably be a lot shorter than this one in particular. But if you like this video, please go ahead and click the thumbs up icon. And if you'd like to see more videos like this from me, please go ahead and click subscribe and the little bell icon to be notified every time I post a new video. I do post videos here on YouTube at least once a week, usually with sewing vlogs like this out on Tuesdays, and sometimes with additional costuming or sewing related content out on Saturdays, especially shorts. But I post every day over on my Instagram, so please go follow me on Instagram. That's at Lady Rebecca Fashions. And if you'd like to help support all of the work that I do on this channel, I do have a link to my Patreon and my Ko-fi down in the description below, or you can send me a super thanks or join my YouTube channel memberships right here on YouTube below the video. I'd also like to take this time to thank all of my absolutely amazing patrons without whom I could not make all of this content, particularly my patrons at the Romantic, Victorian, and Edwardian level tiers, who are Jean, Kim, the Dowager Duchess Isabel Thompson, Audra, Janet, Deborah C, Rowan, Deborah T, Cher Bear, Robin, Nurse Anita, Nick and Steven, Jen, Dale, Judd, and Eileen. Thank you all so much, and thank you all for joining me today. I hope you all have a wonderful week, and I will see you very soon in my next video. Happy sewing!